Hi, in a few moments I'm going to introduce Joshua Mills to you, and he's got a clip. I can hardly wait for you to watch it. It's a wild story about how he got translated in the spirit to China and what God did over there. It is so cool. But I want you to also know that translations, transports in the spirit is something that God's doing. It's in the Bible, and a lot of people are experiencing these things. It is so neat, you know, and I'm looking forward to the day when we're so seasoned in being transported in the spirit that we just yield ourselves to the Spirit and say, take us to wherever you want us to minister, and away we go. No airports, no airline tickets, no vehicles that we have to drive, and just go from meeting to meeting and from glory to glory. That's going to be cool, isn't it? And you know, it might sound way out, but it's a reality. If you want more information, actual teaching about the subject of transports in the Spirit, we have a DVD set called Transports in the Spirit. And so you can get some really good teaching off that, and you can order it online. And I really enjoyed doing that little teaching. It'll help give you some understanding.
I was doing some meetings in Pensacola, Florida several years ago. And while we were in those meetings, there was a lot of people that got healed and a lot of people that got set free. And God was really moving in His glory. And the one night, at the end, as I was doing the altar ministry, I felt the Holy Ghost come upon me and to begin declaring translation and heaven's transportation to the third heaven and to the nations. So I began declaring this in the meeting, and of course I was believing God for everybody else. And later on I found out that the pastor's wife, Maeve Morris, she had actually had a vision of the roof of the church rolling back like a tuna can, just kind of rolling back, or a can of sardines just opening, and people being lifted through the ceiling into these experiences, into the third heavens, into the nations. And as I was standing, I was at the front of the church, and I walked out to the center of the aisle, and I lifted up my hands. I began declaring this translation, transportation to the third heaven, to the nations. And as I began to declare this, I had my eyes closed and my hands lifted. When I opened up my eyes, I was standing physically, I was standing inside an elevator full of Chinese people. They were under my armpits, they were in front of me, they were behind me. Everywhere these Chinese people were, and I was in this elevator. The doors opened in the elevator, and the first thing that came to my mind was not, you know, oh great, I'm having this wonderful heavenly experience. The first thing that came to my mind was, how am I going to get back to Florida? I'm physically feeling, as I'm in China, physically seeing the people, physically seeing these things around me that were not there when I closed my eyes. And so anyhow, I walk out of the elevator, and these thoughts are going through my mind, and I just began praying in the Holy Ghost. And it was like revelation glory came upon me, and a spirit of knowledge just came upon me and began to show me where to go, what to do. And I was directed down the street. I went down this street, went into another building, walked up the stairs. As I walked into this room, there was a bunch of people that were there gathered, holding hands and praying. Now, it was not, I don't believe it was an advertised meeting. I don't believe it was a formal church gathering. It was just a bunch of people that were praying in like this office building. And so I went in and I joined them. I did not understand a word of Chinese. I couldn't understand, I couldn't speak it. But I went in, I just grabbed their hands, and I began speaking in tongues. I just began joining with them. And I remember sharing this testimony because I began ministering to them in this way, just in the gift of tongues. And I remember sharing this testimony a few years later with a lady, Sister Debbie Kendrick, who was a good friend of Ruth Heflin's. And I was sharing with Sister Debbie, and I said, you know, I don't even understand the reason why Jesus would have sent me into this situation, or why the Holy Ghost propelled me into this heavenly experience. Because in the natural, I really didn't understand the fullness of what I was doing. In the natural, I didn't see how I was maybe making a big difference in the people's lives. And I remember Sister Debbie telling me, she said, you know, Joshua, she said, we see in part, we know in part, we prophesy in part. And everything about the realm of the glory is that God's giving us little tiny glimpses into the heavens, and we don't see the fullness of it right away. But in the eternal perspective of things, God is just piecing together little pieces of the puzzle and just putting us in the right places at the right time. And God's lifting us by His Spirit and causing us to go into areas that He would have us go, even when we don't understand the fullness of what we're doing. And that's really what happened with me in that translation experience, or in that transportation experience. God physically lifted me from ministering in Pensacola, Florida. He lifted me into His purposes, set me into China. It was actually the first time that my feet had been on Chinese soil. And so I believe, there's even part of that about God opening up doors to the nations by putting your feet on the soil of the nations. And God used me in that way just to join with them in a prayer meeting. At the end of the prayer meeting, I began handing out business cards from my pocket. And I gave out this one business card to this man. And then I left, and I ended up going back down the road to the place that I came in. And I went back to that elevator, and I just lifted up my hands. I just began praising the Lord. And I was back, instantly I was back in Pensacola, Florida. Well, come to find out, many people that night in the meeting, they had been lifted either to the third heavens and had visions of Jesus Christ, heard God speak wonderful words to them, had encounters with angels. And then there was other people that were lifted into these transportation experiences into the nations, being carried to Africa, being carried to India, these different places in the world, physically being, I'm not talking about just a visionary realm or just a dream. It was physical transportation into these nations. And it was absolutely amazing that this had happened. And it was so, when it happened, it was so full of glory that it's like, I really couldn't even speak about it immediately, because it's like, the Bible talks about ones that were lifted to heaven and they couldn't even talk about the things that they saw, or they couldn't talk about all their experiences because of it just having such glory on it. And that's really what happened. I remember we went out to the restaurant afterwards, and I'm just sitting there like trying to comprehend everything that happened. And it's like, how, in your mind you try to figure out, how did that happen in the natural? How was I carried into that experience? How was I lifted? How is that even possible? And the thing with God is that He takes us beyond the possibilities of man and lifts us into the possibilities of the heavens. And that's what happened that night. And several weeks later, we were ministering in Baltimore, Maryland. And we received an email at our office from this Chinese man who thanked us for coming and joining with them in their church. I guess that was a church gathering. And joining with them in that prayer meeting, and invited me to come back anytime that I wanted to come back. And Janet and I were just floored that we would even get this. That not only did I have this encounter, not only did this happen in the realm of the Spirit, not only was I lifted in this way, but then we got the confirmation of it several weeks later. So that was absolutely amazing. And I believe that it's just a sign of God wanting to bring us and lift us into places that He's called us for. And in the realm of the natural, we say, well, that's impossible for God to take me to that place, or it'd be impossible for God to put me in that position, or it'd be impossible for God to move me into that arena. But whenever God's called you, whenever He's put an anointing upon your life, whenever He's put His calling upon you, then He'll be the one that will lift you. The Bible says He's the glory and He's the lifter. And in this day, He's wanting to lift us into dimensions of blessing. He's wanting to lift us into dimensions of the glory that we've never known, we've never experienced before. And we might not understand the fullness of it. We might not have the complete revelation. But we can trust that as we see in part and we know in part, God knows everything. And He sees the fullness. And He's lifting us into those eternal things of His glory.